Chapter 1. Aosen awoke from his dream and immediately felt his stomach lurch. He leaned over his bed and retched for a moment, but there was nothing expelled. Relieved that he wouldn't have to clean anything off of his floor this morning, he rolled back over and rested his head on his pillow. He closed his eyes and listened to the sound of his heart beating as he recalled the dream. His head throbbed as he tried to wrap it around the symbolism. While the younger races were blessed with some degree of parity in their dreams, Yansha, like Aosen, rarely had them. When they did dream, their dreams were often symbolic or meaningful. The dream had not been particularly terrifying. Before this, he had dreamed of battles as well as his own death and had been less disturbed by them, even though he knew they could be prophetic indications of his demise. They never were. They usually meant someone would die in combat, but it was never him. This dream, of snakes and trees floating in the void of space, was quite a bit different. When he opened his eyes again, he was nearly blinded by the automatic lighting in the bunker. He raised a hand to shield them and sat up on his bed. When they finally adjusted, the first thing he saw was his distorted reflection in the polished metal wall. He noted that he had lost some weight. He looked down at his nanoband, the small wristband which monitored his vitals as well as supplied him with information and a connection to nanospace, and checked for the time. It was still early evening on the surface, even though it felt like morning to him down here. He steeled himself and climbed out of bed and was immediately thrown back onto it by the large wings of his pet Dern. Aosen could tell that this was no playful attack. Dern didn't know the meaning of play. They were protectors and hunters, but never playful. As he eyed the large red bird, he could see that she was concerned for him. Aosen brushed past his companion and started to get dressed. "Come on, you couldn't possibly be worried about me, Crine. It was only a dream, nothing to worry about. You've been less concerned when I've come back with plasma burns." Crine flapped her wings in response, her bright red feathers giving off an almost metallic sheen in the bunker's bright white lights. Dern were believed to have some low-level connection to the Aether which allowed them to see into the minds of those they had bonded to. A bonded female tended to play the role of concerned mother more than loving companion. Crine folded her wings and rested on a perch, her black eyes fixed on him, daring him to continue his lies. He slipped an arm through his combat jacket. The plasma burn on the right side was an indication of how close he'd come to death. The reinforced material had saved him once, but it wouldn't a second time. There wasn't much the combat jacket would do for him now that the planet had been bombarded. He inspected himself in the mirror. At 171 ILU, he wasn't the tallest Yansha, but he was hardly the shortest. His frame, which before the war started had been filled out and even bearing muscles in some places, was growing slender and more to the fashion of his people. His silver hair was beginning to lose its luster, though this had more to do with his maturation than any amount of stress the war had placed on him, and the tips of his ears were developing into a fine point. On his home planet, he would have been nearing adulthood, still mostly a child, but among the younger races he had been an adult for quite some time. The orange eyes which stared back at him almost didn't seem his own. Where there had once been youthful fire, there was now only a grim determination. He raised a hand to his face, ignoring the slight stubble that had begun to grow there, and instead focused on the white cuts and scratches that were intruding on his caramel skin. He shrugged to himself and turned toward the portal. He didn't have time to focus on frivolities like that. He looked down to his wrist as his nanoband flashed yellow and gave off a low tone. This was an indication of the radiation level in the area. It had entered levels that would be dangerous if exposed to them for a long period of time. Crine screeched softly and flapped her wings. "Yes, I know I shouldn't dawdle. You know, Crine, I think that my mother sent you to me just so she can nag me from halfway across the galaxy." He smiled at his companion and walked toward the portal in front of his quarters. In most cases, the portal could be used to travel nearby on the planet. All that was required was the proper address. Then you could be moved to any other active portal on Aurelia. The bombardment had severed the connection. Radiation had a way of messing with portal travel, but due to the bunker's shielding, it was still capable of local transit. He tapped on his nanoband, and the portal shifted slightly in color from a dim yellow to a bright green. He stepped through the general light and into chaos. Scene change. Is it Aurelia? Because, I read that and I paused because I just said Aurelia. Is it Aurelia or Aurelia? Okay, so I said it right. Yeah, I don't care if you're recording, Kreese. These are questions that need to be answered. Alright, I'm moving on. He knew exactly what to expect. Soldiers moving through the corridors which made up the central hub of the bunker, many of them weak and wounded. Civilians were lining the sides of the corridors. There were so many of them, yet not enough. Most of them were huddled together and hunched over. They had seen their homes destroyed, their friends and loved ones killed. Those who were fortunate enough to escape injury and had already overcome their shock were looking to help in any way they could. Some soldiers were directing them to the hangar. Aosen thought back to how things looked before he went to his quarters, and he felt a sense of relief that the situation had improved at least this much. After 2 weeks in the bunker, there were still so few people gathered. When they were initially ordered into the bunker, only the soldiers were present. They were able to send parties to rescue and recover civilians. Unfortunately, that was the last he heard of the general. Allison feared for his commanding officer, but he knew that it was his responsibility to ensure the safety of his people and the civilians. At least it was partly his responsibility. As Allison proceeded down the corridor, he noticed that he was being approached by a portly Canosian with a balding head and weary eyes. He noticed a blond-haired man with an eye patch spotted his approach and quickly cut him off. The man's exasperated expression indicated that this wasn't the first time he'd tried. Allison thought he recognized the man, but couldn't place the face. The blond man pointed at Allison, and the young commander found himself flanked by a small escort. "What's this? You lot don't think I can make it to command by myself today?" One of the soldiers, a young Arenian woman with a scar running down the left side of her face, Allison recognized her as Sergeant Kin. "It's not that, sir. Officer Seika is just acting on the orders of Commander Kai. She doesn't want you getting distracted today, says there's something you need to see in command right away. You're given the task of making sure you don't wander off to the hangar again." Allison felt his heart jump. The prospect of news was exciting, and the possibility that they had made contact with allies on the planet, or off-world, was enough to make him quicken his step. He checked his nanoband, and found that there was still no connection to the nanospace that ruled out the possibility of contact. Did Kai give any indication as to the sense of urgency? "No, sir," she simply said, and I quote, "The mark you see Commander Yenra, you make sure to get him here. We can't afford to have him wandering off like he did yesterday." Her imitation of Kai was more than a little humorous. As he entered the military block, he was greeted by some of the soldiers who had served directly under his command in the last 2 years. The first specialists of the 1st Aurelian Corps, named the Dern Eyes. They were hardly a crack team, but under most circumstances they were one of the best fighting units in the system, though they were tailored for reconnaissance and stealth missions. As a field commander, it was Allison's job to ensure those circumstances, which he had done well during the early months of the war. He knew there was very little that could be done about starships bombarding you from orbit. Indiscriminate radiation bombardment was considered a war crime, but with the core systems in strife, there was no one to punish it. Allison felt his stomach begin to churn again and cleared his throat to keep from retching. He took note of some of the soldiers lying in the corridor as he passed them by. Many of them were injured, others merely battered and bruised. A feeling of overwhelming pride filled him as they offered their salutes, and he returned them in kind. The pride was overtaken by an overwhelming sense of defeat. What use was it being the best if you didn't have a ship? It didn't matter how clever your field commander was if he was stuck on the ground. Someone had failed his men, but it wasn't Allison. "You're about as easy to read as a children's newsfeed," a woman's voice said from behind him. The voice was soft and soothing, yet held an overwhelming sense of authority. "We've been over this, Allison. You're not to blame here. We chose a side of the war that doesn't exactly have the fleets to spare at the moment, especially not since Ransom and Hominin. And who knows whether our cause still endures." Allison smiled to himself and felt his body relax. What the fuck is distracting me? I lost my place. "And who knows whether our cause still endures." Allison smiled to himself and felt his entire body relax. The voice had this effect on him. "Perhaps you're right, Kai, but I could have done more." As they spoke, Kai fell into step with him. "We could have saved more." Kai glanced at him and let out a sigh. "Is that so? Then tell me, Allison, how are you supposed to stop the Sable Fleet? Ray Kasha was renowned for his ruthlessness before this war. Did you honestly believe that for the bloodshed had dulled his cruelty?" Allison heaved a sigh and shrugged his shoulders. He watched as one of his men lurched over and vomited in a small receptacle he had been given. "Look at that. We're slowly dying from radiation poisoning down here. There has to be something else we can do. Last I checked, we carried rifles and Che blades, not miracle machines. Had the Neos not destroyed the defense batteries weeks ago, perhaps we would have been able to take out 1 or 2 ships, but the end result would have been the same or worse. Could you imagine what they would have done to us if the planetary shield was still active? I've seen the OLGA used before. It's not a pleasant way to die." They approached the nerve center of the command block and passed through the door leading into it. Allison looked to Kai, but her green eyes were facing front as if she refused to look at him. Before he could open his mouth to respond to her, she started speaking again. "You need to accept that and stop kicking yourself. As of this moment, and as far as we can tell, you're one of the highest-ranked officers on the planet. You need to start acting like it. Booting like you're some sort of damned adolescent isn't going to get us out of this alive. Now we have work to do." Allison followed Kai down a smaller corridor to the nerve center of the bunker. As he walked behind her, he looked her over. She was much shorter than him, standing only 155 CILU to his 171. She looked like a dancer or a virtual idol than a soldier. Her Arenian frame was graced with feminine curves, and her short black hair bounced slightly as she walked. By nearly every standard in the galaxy, she would have been considered beautiful. Most Arenian women were, and yet many of them were soldiers. Allison chalked it up to their breeding or perhaps their genetic legacy. Kai had other reason, though. She joined the military after slavers raided her colony. Allison had known Kai for nearly 3 years and had found her attractive the moment he met her. He has always had trouble separating the women from the soldier. She never had that trouble with him. As they entered the nerve center of the bunker, they were greeted almost immediately by Osin's second-in-command, Captain Alois. Alois offered his superiors a salute, and then made a gesture towards the nearest console. "I hope that you slept well, Commander." The Anelian's voice was chipper and precise, as usual. "Just thank you for asking, Captain. Now, what is this situation that was so urgent?" Alois smiled, his plump rosy cheeks glowing with excitement. The Anelians had a way of being able to smile in even the darkest of times. Their grasp on sentient emotions was not quite what they should be. "I think it would be best if
fucking S is silent!
Well, you should have fucking told me! I warned you yesterday! I told you. There are any names, you fucking... Yeah, well, he just overrode. So, Aloy? If you're gonna yell, at least yell the correct name at me now. Aloy. Okay. Okay. Tell me if somebody's fucking French. Alright? Now, where the fuck was I? Sheesh. Aloy offered... No, I was further than that. Aloy smiled, his plump rosy cheeks glowing. No, further than that. Thanks, Dannan. I think it would be best if Commander Kai explained that to you, sir. Aloy stepped away from the console and offered a smile to Kai. "It's all yours, Commander." Kai didn't return a smile, she just started working. "Alright, here's what we have." She pressed a button on the console and a three-dimensional image of the planet Aurelia appeared. She pointed to a small dot located on one of the large mountain ranges near the equator of the planet. "This is where we are. Due to interference, or whatever, we've been unable to make contact with anything that isn't in this immediate area. However," she pressed a button on her nanoboard and another dot appeared less than 45 KILU away. "This is another portal we were able to connect to." Allison felt helpful as she watched the dim light flashing. "Great, do we know what it is?" "No, but we're going to send a team through. I have Graham and a team suiting up for it now. We don't know if, whatever this is, it's shielded from radiation like we are, so we'll be using radiation suits until we're certain." "You're sending Graham?" "You have an entire bunker full of capable soldiers, and you're sending your communications officer." Kai shot him a glare and crossed her arms beneath her breast. "It's precisely because he's the comm officer that I'm sending him. Didn't you think for a second that he might be more useful to us establishing communications over there than he would be monitoring the incoming communications here? Just for the record, Aloy, how many incoming communications have we received in the 2 weeks we've occupied this bunker?" Aloy, not understanding the subtleties of this interaction, read from his tablet. "We have received 0 communications, Commander." Allison brought his hand to his forehead and let out a sigh. "Fine, Graham can go, but I'm going as well. I'm not going to trust a single person to him and his command. He's never led a single soldier in his life, and if things get hairy over there... Things getting hairy over there is exactly why you're not going, Allison. Didn't you understand me when I told you that you're one of the highest-ranking officers on the planet? The general missing, it's you and I commanding these people. We can't risk you over there. I'm sorry, but I can't allow it." "Allow it? Kai, the last I checked, you don't outrank me. Besides, I'd rather I go over there and get myself shot up rather than having anything happen to you. Just imagine me left with all the work. I think we both know that's not good for anyone. Now tell Graham that I'll be joining him on this little expedition." Kai sucked her teeth and balled her hand into a fist. "Fine. Go on your little adventure. You know if... Dan? Is this a soft CH or a hard CH? Before you yell at me again. Achian or Achian?" Achian. Wow. Glad I didn't read that one out loud. You know, if Achian were here, he wouldn't let you do this either. Nonsense. If Achian were here, he'd have sent me without even briefing me. I think your memories of the old man and mine aren't quite the same. Old bastard had a habit of sending me into situations without knowing whether or not we could get out of them. Do you remember when we tried to take back the spaceport? Damn disaster that was. Kai shook her head. "Can't believe that you can just talk about him like that. Don't you have any respect?" "I respected the old man like a father, and it's because of that I can talk about him like this. But hey, if you manage to find 2 more commanders on this glowing rock, feel free to form a tribunal and have me tried for insubordination." Kai didn't answer. She just turned to her console and began working. Allison turned from her and started out of the corridor. Before he could make it through the threshold, she called after him. "By the way, we found some life signs over there, so try not to shoot at everything you see. We don't know if they're friend or foe." Allison only smiled as he made his way to the armory to suit up. Though he was out of earshot, he responded, "I seem to have that problem over here as well." End chapter 1.